It's funny how that first kind of crisp breeze of fall, it always makes me think of like two things, right? Cozy sweaters and, of course, football season. But this year, I don't know, I've been thinking about how loaded this time of year can be, especially for those of us who've lost someone who really, really loved the game.
It's true, those emotions can be so intertwined. It's
Yeah.
like this interesting mix, right? The energy, the excitement of a new season, but then that sort of bittersweet ache of someone being missing from, the sidelines of your life.
Exactly. And, that's actually what we're diving into today. How to sort of navigate all those rituals and all those emotions of football when you're grieving the loss of someone who really made those game days so special.
Yeah.
We got some great insights, I think, from a grief counselor, and then also just a really thoughtful blog post to kind of help us unpack all of this, because I think this is something a lot of us can relate to on some level.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that the counselor's advice really highlights right off the bat is that there's just no one-size-fits-all approach to grief,
Yeah.
especially when you layer it on top of something that's as communal and, let's be honest, as loud as football season can be.
Yeah, it's not like you can just call a timeout on grief when the whistle blows, right? Like, I,
Hmm.
I remember after my grandfather passed, and he was a huge, huge EG Raiders fan. I went to a game with my dad, and it was the weirdest thing. I felt this like mix of wanting to cheer and also just wanting to like disappear.
Right. And that makes complete sense. It's totally normal to feel, kind of those conflicting emotions because grief is not linear.
No.
It's not like a playbook you can just memorize. One minute you might feel this rush of joy remembering a big win with your loved one, and then the next moment, bam, the weight of their absence hits you. And it's especially tough when you're surrounded by all those familiar sights and sounds.
It's almost like the ground is shifting under you, which is something the counselor actually mentions in this article. And they talk about how helpful it can be to create this personalized tribute space. And honestly, I gotta say, when I first read that, it sounded a little intimidating. Like, am I supposed to like build a shrine or something?
Right. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the word space. But what the counselor's really getting at here is the sense of intentionality.
Okay.
It's less about some elaborate physical setup
Mm-hmm.
and more about just designating a place.
Mm.
Even just a small corner where you're consciously connecting those objects that your loved one cherished with your own personal process of grieving.
Right. So going back to like this whole idea of a tribute space,
Yeah.
are we talking about something like, okay, say like your dad was a huge Steelers fan, so you might like dedicate a shelf to like his terrible towel and maybe like a signed photo or
Yeah.
something.
Exactly. But instead of those items, instead of them just becoming these sort of like bittersweet reminders, you
Right.
know, you actively incorporate them into your grieving process. Like
Yeah.
maybe you light a candle there every Sunday before kickoff,
Yeah.
or like you share a memory of your dad out loud, like you're telling him about the game.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Like you're keeping their memory like woven into the fabric of the season still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's really nice.
And it doesn't even have to be like, objects, right? Like maybe you incorporate your loved one's favorite football snack into like your Sunday routine. Like it's about those little rituals,
Right.
those threads of connection that help you feel close to them.
Yeah, those threads of connection, it kind of makes me think about, I don't know, maybe like the elephant in the room a little bit, which is, what about like actually going to games?
Yeah.
Because that can be really loaded, you know?
Absolutely. And the counselor, in your research, she mentions that for some people, just all the sights and sounds of the stadium,
Yeah,
it can be really overwhelming.
totally.
Like all those memories come flooding back, and that might feel like just too painful.
It's like everyone else is so caught up in the excitement of it all, and you're kind of like, you're wrestling with this whole internal tug of war because part of you wants to be caught up in it too, but it hurts.
Yeah. And it's so important, I think, in those
Yeah.
moments to remember that there's no right or wrong answer, right?
Mhm.
Like maybe you sort of push yourself to go to a game
Hmm.
and you find that like the energy of the crowd actually brings you some comfort.
Yeah.
Or maybe you decide that no, staying home, watching from, your personalized tribute space.
Right.
That feels more nurturing. That feels better right now.
Yeah.
And it really is just about honoring, your own needs and your own limits in that moment.
And that's got to be where having a really solid support system comes in, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because whether you decide to, kind of brave the crowds and go to a game, or whether you're like, you know what, I'm going to watch from home, like having someone there who really gets what you're going through, I have to imagine that makes a world of difference.
100%.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, a friend, a family member, even a therapist,
Yeah.
having someone to lean on, someone who can just listen without judgment. That's so valuable.
Mm.
And the article also mentions the power of like online support groups.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes when you're grieving, it can feel like, I don't know, nobody else quite gets it. Especially if they haven't gone through something similar.
Yeah, and that's where connecting with others who understand this, this kind of like unique intersection of grief and football fandom, that can be incredibly powerful because those online communities, they can really provide you with that space to share stories, to offer words of encouragement, and just to know that you're not alone in what you're going through.
Yeah, it's like finding your people, right?
Exactly.
Even if it is like through a screen.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about creating these, kind of physical spaces, finding support in other people, but what about expressing grief through like actually making something?
Oh, that's such a wonderful way to channel those emotions.
Yeah.
And while the blog post mentions, scrapbooking, which, hey, that could be a great outlet for some people.
For sure.
If someone's listening and they're thinking like, okay, scrapbooking, not really my thing.
Yeah.
What would you say are some other ways to sort of channel those emotions, those memories into something, I don't know, like tangible?
It's funny you should say tangible, because
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the key here. Grief can feel so amorphous.
So overwhelming,
Yeah.
But when you create something, it's almost like you're giving it an outlet. It's like you're taking all those swirling feelings and you're kind of shaping them into something that you can actually hold on to.
Oh, I like that. It's like taking back a little bit of control. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be like, a master craftsperson or anything like that. Think about the things that your person loved. Like maybe you create a playlist, right? Of all the songs that they would blast during games, their own personal touchdown anthem,
I love that.
So suddenly hitting play becomes this incredibly poignant act of remembrance.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be music, right? Like, what about writing? I would imagine that journaling, or even just like, jotting down memories, like that could be really powerful too.
100%. The blog post, it actually mentions like writing a letter to your loved one.
Oh, wow.
And even if you never send it, the act of just, getting all of those feelings out on paper,
Right.
it can be so cathartic.
Yeah.
Or, like say if your person loved to cook,
Yeah.
maybe you try your hand at like their famous game day chili. You'd be surprised at what memories kind of bubble up when you engage your senses in that way.
Food, music, writing. These are all such personal and really powerful ways to keep someone's memory alive. And, it makes me think about how even though, grief, it can feel so all-encompassing, especially during those early days.
Yeah.
The love that we shared with someone, that never really fades, does it?
You're so right.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It might change shape. It might feel a little different as time goes by.
Right.
But that love, it becomes part of us, part of our own story.
And maybe that's a good way to kind of think about this, as we head into this football season, or even beyond that, right? Like it's okay to feel those waves of sadness. It's okay to miss someone fiercely.
Yeah.
But it's also okay to embrace the joy, the excitement, the things that made those game days so special. In a way, it's kind of like they're still with us.
Yeah.
Cheering us on from the sidelines.
I love that. Cheering us on to keep those memories alive, to find those moments of joy, and to just keep moving forward, one game at a time.
One game at a time. Exactly. And to all of you listening, as always, thank you for diving deep with us. If this episode has brought up any, difficult emotions for you, please know that you're not alone. And remember those resources we mentioned. We'll be sure to have links to those in the show notes.
And please know that seeking support is a sign of incredible strength.
Yeah.
Not weakness.
Yes.
Take care of yourself.
Yep.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.